Hey, welcome to this episode of Your 5-Letter Word. Today, we're going to talk about 3 ways that you can improve your communication skills. 3 practical ways to get you started. If you would like to improve your communication skills, the first thing you need to do is really narrow down what domain of communication you'd like to focus on. Let me give you an example. Imagine you would like to start working out. If you go into Google and type in how to work out better, you'll get information about bodybuilding, about Pilates, about yoga, about marathon running, about strength training, about so many other types of workouts that are available to you. The exact same thing applies to communication. Are you looking to improve your public speaking skills? Are you looking to improve the way that you lead meetings that don't involve a presentation? Are you looking to improve your one-on-one interactions, your client meetings, the way that you give feedback, right? You need to narrow down the domain within which you'd like to focus. That's the first thing you need to do. Getting clarity on that will help you really narrow your focus down on specific strategies that will actually be applicable to you. Otherwise, you run the risk of really spending time and effort and energy learning these things, learning these communication techniques that might not actually be applicable to you if it's taken out of context, if it's within the wrong domain. So for example, if you're someone who is needing some support with improving the way that you handle one-on-one client meetings, let's say you're a coach and you do virtual meetings all day. If you're having a hard time leading the meeting and showing your expertise and being authoritative, well, the feedback that you need, the types of strategies you need to work on, completely differ than if you're someone who's leading a meeting of 10 people at work. Completely different domains. So tip number 1, make sure you get clarity on the right communication domain to start with. Once you've done that, that's when we get into tip number 2. Making sure that you give yourself the freedom to select from the menu of strategies available to you. Not all strategies are the same. Not all advice is the same. Not all advice will resonate and work for everyone across the board. That's just the reality of the matter. Sure, there are tips that are, universally accepted that generally speaking tend to be applicable to most people. That's fantastic. Those are tips worth considering. However, there's a lot of information out there. There are a lot of strategies and tips out there. Give yourself the freedom to try some and to leave them if you find they're not working for you. So going back to our workout example, imagine you decide that you would like to go into strength training. Well, now that you're in the domain of strength training, now you have advice about how to deadlift, how to do maybe go through weights, how to increase your weight, how to do a leg day, upper body day, push day, pull day, etc. There's so much advice out there and not all of it will resonate with you. And that is okay. Now, the other thing to consider is that just like workout advice, there's beginner levels, intermediate, and advanced. So be honest with yourself about where you are and what level you'd like to start with. So even if you receive a really good tip, if it's at the advanced level, it may just be too difficult for you to implement right away, and you need to start at the beginner level. Understand it kind of like a menu if you were at a restaurant. If you were to go to a restaurant and sit down and look at the menu, the things that stand out to you, the things that you feel really called to eat and to try and to order, that's what you're looking for when you're getting communication advice. The things that make you excited, the things that you'll hear about, the tips and the strategies that you're like, ooh, I would like to try that. Ooh, that seems doable. That's what you want to start with. And just like at the menu, there's some things that are exciting. There's some things that you feel kind of meh about. You could take it, you can leave it, you could try it, you could not. And some stuff that is just completely unappealing. Same thing with communication advice. If something is completely unappealing to you, don't start with that. Start with the strategies that light you up and make you excited to try them. Start at the level that you are comfortable with, beginner, intermediate, advanced, and work your way up. Now, an important point to make here. Start with 1 or 2 strategies at the most. If you're someone who's excited, if you're perhaps a little bit of an overachiever, it's very tempting to consider 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different strategies and think that we can work on them and implement them and we'll be that much better if we do it all at once. And I'm going to burst your bubble here because it's unfortunately just not true. Instead, if you are trying to do too much all at the same time, it will actually be overwhelming for your system. It will lead to resistance, it will lead to a loss of motivation, and it will lead to you quitting the strategies. Now, by now, the majority of us have years, if not decades worth of communication habits that we rely on. Now, what is a habit really? Underlying a habit are neural pathways and neural connections in our brain. When we do something over and over and over, the repetition of that thing creates neural pathways in our brain that become stronger the more that we use them. So when you are learning a new strategy, when you are trying to break the habit, you are essentially rewiring your brain to create a new neural pathway instead. So that when you're in that situation, instead of relying on your old habit, you rely on this new habit that you're creating. Now, this is a very important distinction for you to understand because on the one hand, breaking that old habit and establishing those new neural connections is hard at first. But the beautiful thing is that the more that you do it, the more that you do this new thing over and over and over again, the stronger those neural connections become and the easier it becomes to do it. And the stronger this new neural pathway becomes, the less strong or the weaker the old one becomes. So that's why it's hard at first, but with repetition, with practice, it becomes easier and you retrain yourself, you rewire your brain to do this new thing instead. Now here's where the important distinction comes in. As you're selectively going through the menu and picking the strategies that you really like, the ones that resonate with you, and again, leaving the ones that don't, it is very important for you to be honest with yourself and to really consider this. Is something not resonating with you? Or is something difficult for you because you are breaking the habit and rewiring your connections and it's just hard? That's just the reality, it's just hard? Or do you not like it and you don't want to do it because you genuinely don't like it? It doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't resonate with your personality, it doesn't align with your values, whatever the case. That is an important distinction to make because if something is actually a very good strategy that is aligned with you, that is supportive of your values, your personality, the way that you would like to communicate, but it is hard, keep that in mind. Because you don't want to quit something too soon and dismiss it as not being good enough or not being for you, when really, in reality, it may just be hard to do right now in the moment. Okay? So just to recap, step 1, get clarity on the domain of communication that you want to improve. Step 2, go through the advice out there. Just like a menu, be selective with what you would like to try. Pick 1 or 2 things to start with at first. Because again, you don't want to overwhelm yourself. Once you feel like you've gone through the beginner, intermediate, getting to the advanced stage, that's when you should feel comfortable enough. That's when it should be quite a new habit that is easier to implement and easier to use in your everyday life. That's when you then go back to the menu and pick 1 or 2 new strategies to add to your repertoire of communication skills. And by the time you've finished the 1 or 2 first meals, once you've perfected the first 1 or 2 strategies, you have changed and your preferences have changed. So when you go back to the menu of items, you'll find that what you thought originally may not be what you thought anymore. So perhaps some tips that were very unappealing to you in the beginning, well, now they might look a little bit more appealing. Now you might see the value in them, whereas before you didn't. And that is a good sign of growth and progression. So if that happens to you, I applaud you. All right. Once you are working on implementing 1 or 2 strategies at a time, the third step is really putting it into practice. Really putting it into practice in a live setting as much as possible. So when we are learning things, it's very tempting for many of us to just consume information and knowledge. Look for more sources, watch more videos, listen to more podcasts and audiobooks. And it's fantastic. It's a really great way to educate yourself and to see what's out there and to start consuming this theoretical knowledge. But until you put it into practice, it will remain theoretical and it won't really serve you well because you're not using it. Now I know stepping out of our comfort zone is hard at first, especially when we're changing the way that we communicate. It can be a little bit embarrassing, in a say, to try these new things because again, we're so used to speaking in a specific way. Trying it may feel like people may judge us. It might feel embarrassing. It might feel like we're sort of faking it at first, and that's okay. So if you need to get the live practice at home first, record yourself, talk to a family member or a friend, a trusted colleague, whoever you can that you feel safe with to try on that new thing, to put it into practice again and again and again. Once you feel comfortable doing that, that's when you really need to push yourself to get live practice. Start with low stakes environments if you need to. So things like at the gym, at a local coffee shop, even if it's at work, but maybe in a more casual setting. But then you have to make sure you're putting it into practice in the actual situation that you're looking to work on. Again, if you're someone who wants to improve within the domain of one-to-one interactions and you're learning how to be more authoritative, you have to make sure that you're trying it in the actual sessions that you're having, because that is what is really going to rewire those neural pathways. That is what is really going to take it from being something that you are trying to something that you are doing, to something that becomes a habit for you. Okay? So again, specify your domain, go through, selectively pick one or two strategies that really resonate with you, and then put them into practice again and again and again. My advice to you would be that you should try a strategy at least a handful of times before you decide whether or not it's for you. Because again, breaking the habit that you are used to is hard. And so you want to give yourself an honest chance at trying to see whether something really doesn't resonate with you or if you're just experiencing resistance because you're not used to doing that thing. Okay, so something to consider. All right, so as we wrap up today's episode, my 5-letter word for you is items. Items. Life is a menu, communication is a menu, and you have the freedom to choose what it is that you want to work on, what it is that you want to improve, and how you want to do it. Not all communication advice is the same, and not everyone takes the same communication advice and implements it in the same way. But there's beauty in that, and there's freedom in that. And I want you to give yourself permission to take something and adapt it to you. Adapt it to your personality, adapt it to your business, adapt it to your style. And if it's not working, if your tastes change, if your palate changes, if your preferences change, give yourself the freedom to go back to the menu of items and select something new. Because as people, we are always growing, we're always evolving, we're always changing. And the longer you stay in your business or at work, in your career, the more that you learn, the more that you interact, the different contexts that you're in, you will change. That's just the nature of it. You will grow and evolve. So give yourself the freedom to always go back, look at the items, look at the menu, and be selective with what you're doing. Okay. So as usual, I would love to hear about your breakthroughs. If you're someone who would like additional support with really improving the way that you interact in one-to-one settings or in everyday conversational settings at work specifically, I invite you to check out my communication course. Okay, I'd love to hear about your breakthroughs. Let me know if you have any questions, and feel free to let me know if there's a specific topic you'd like me to cover next.